If you've ever been out for a bike ride on your nice fast bike and stopped to pick up a few items on the way home but had nowhere to carry it except awkwardly off your handlebars, or maybe you love running errands in the neighborhood on your comfortable upright bike, but there's that one hill that you just struggle with on this bike. Ugh. If that's the case, the problem is not that you're riding your bike wrong, but it might be that you're riding the wrong bike. Today I have 4 things that you should think about before buying a bike for urban cycling and bike commuting that you've probably not thought about before, and if you've already made the wrong decision, I've got some tips to help fix it. Okay, so my goal today is not to tell you which bike that you should buy, rather just to get you thinking about some questions you should ask yourself before you do that maybe you've never thought about before. But first, let's go back in history a bit. Don't stop watching, I promise this will be fast. So this is the starting point for the modern bicycle. John Kemp Starley's Rover, what they called back then a safety bicycle, released in the late 1880s, and it really was a revolutionary design, even though it seems so common today. 2 wheels of equal size, a chain drive, the familiar diamond-shaped frame. Now think of this as the trunk of the bicycle evolutionary tree. This is the starting point. One of the amazing things about this design is how quickly it spread. Almost immediately, bicycles were everywhere, and within that there was all kinds of innovations and variations that came out really quickly. And almost immediately people started innovating, adapting them to all kinds of jobs and uses and recreations. And if you put all those evolutions on that bicycle evolutionary tree, I think you'll start to see that there are 2 main branches that evolved. Question 1, how do we make this thing go faster? Question 2, how do we make this thing work in our lives? That first wave was all about racing. Gears, derailleurs, better brakes, lighter materials. This all drove innovation, and those innovations came quickly. In North America, that branch really took off in the middle part of the last century. As car culture took over, people used the bicycle less and less for transportation and for work. Then the 10-speed boom of the 1970s, in the midst of the first fitness wave, cycling became rebranded as an athletic activity. It became a way of getting healthy and staying fit. In the eyes of everyday people, it became a sport. The bike became sports equipment. When mountain biking got popular in the 1980s, this pushed cycling even deeper into high-performance territory. Bikes became more specialized. Companies competed for the latest high-performance innovation. Helmets became part of the activity, and even the clothing people wore was driven by performance. If you walk into most bike shops in North America today, you'll see that most of them are trying to answer the first question. They're basically sports equipment stores. They specialize in high-performance bikes, high-tech gear, Lycra, lightweight materials, speed. I mean, these bikes are amazing to ride. They're so much fun. I'm riding one of them now. I ride them for recreation and athletics and fitness all the time. And that's fantastic. But what about that other branch of the evolutionary tree? This is my Oma Fiets. It's my Dutch grandma bike. I got it from a friend of mine in Winnipeg who imported a whole bunch of these bikes to Canada because they're so hard to find here in North America. I've got a whole video on this project. It's really cool. You should check it out. One of the reasons he did this project is because he really wanted to open North Americans' eyes to a whole second branch of that bicycle evolutionary tree that most of us don't see here. It's about utility. The designers of this bike were not driven by speed or performance. They were driven by one very specific need, which was getting around the cities of the Netherlands. And you can see how the design choices that went into a bike like this were made to meet that specific need. It's upright and comfortable, which is great for everyday riding, but not great on hills. Good thing the country there is flat. It's got very robust fenders because it's wet. There's internal gears and internal chain, all that to keep it low maintenance and easy to operate. 3 speeds, pedal brakes. It's just for simplicity and durability, which is exactly what it was designed to do. Where the performance branch asks, how do we remove weight and go faster? The utility branch asks, how do we add capacity? How do we take kids to school? The Bachfiets, the Longtail, the cargo bike, these are practical design choices driven by real life. Look at the typical modern bike used in a bike share program as another everyday example. When Paris, Montreal, and Chicago needed bikes that everyone would ride in any clothes with zero maintenance for one-way trips, they all converged on utility solutions. Step-through frames, internal hubs, enclosed drivetrains, integrated lights. The Dutch had already solved these problems, and when durability and practicality were needed, that's where designers turned. Did I say I was going to be fast through the history section? Okay, I lied. All right, but what does this have to do with your bike commute? Well, if you've been raised here in Canada or the US or many other places in the world, You might have been raised in a place where this utility branch of the evolutionary tree of the bicycle has been marginalized to the point of almost invisibility. And this is a problem because for urban cycling and bike commuting, sometimes, not always, but sometimes, it's more utility than racing. And if you're unaware of this whole branch of the tree, then you may be missing the sweet spot for your bike. I suspect most of us are not going to be commuting on a pure racing bike or a pure utility bike. That bike back there, that's a Priority 8. That is the bike that I commute on in the summertime, and I love it. And it falls somewhere in the middle of those two branches. It's pretty speedy and quick, but it's also got a rack for carrying stuff. I've got some swept back handlebars on there for my comfort, and it is a low maintenance belt drive so I can ride it every day and not worry too much about it. I've been riding bikes like this since before Priority became a sponsor of this channel, and I really like them. That may not be the perfect bike for your commute, but you should at least be aware that there are two branches and a lot of space in between them. And speaking of options, if you like this video, please consider supporting this channel. You can buy my course on being a better bike commuter. I just added 2 new sections on e-biking and cargo biking, plus a new lower priced starter pack, or you could become a member or even subscribe. All of it's great. I appreciate all the support. Let's talk for a minute, not about bikes, but about cars, and specifically about the way that we choose cars, because over the last 20 years, the cars that we're choosing to buy have changed dramatically. Gone are the small sedans and hatchbacks that became really popular coming out of the oil crisis of the 70s into the 80s. Small cars like those today make up less than 20% of the market. Instead, what people tend to buy now are bigger trucks and big sport utility vehicles. In 2024, the global SUV market was valued at $41 billion. It's projected to hit $219 billion by 2032. SUVs now make up 60% of new vehicle registrations. In 2025, automotive market research firm CSM International looked into why consumers are choosing SUVs, and the reasons are really interesting. It's not even just about size, it's about the ruggedness and the perceived aggression of these vehicles. Drivers think that people are more likely to give way to them if they drive a vehicle like this. And they also found a big part of the decision was cultural identity and lifestyle signaling. SUVs are a form of conspicuous consumption, signaling a aspirational, outdoorsy, rugged, yet luxurious lifestyle. And you can't discount the psychological normalization factor that goes into these decisions. It can be really hard as a social species to make a decision that's outside of the norm. If you live in a family or a city that's full of people driving pickup trucks, then there is absolutely societal pressure for you to also drive a pickup truck. So when it comes down to it, we all like to think of ourselves as rational consumers, but when it comes to automobiles at least, we are absolutely not. We make decisions based on emotion, on status, on aspiration, on lifestyle, and on psychological normalization. These emotional, psychological, and societal forces absolutely play into the decisions we make about cycling as well. I would say it can be almost impossible to make a completely rational choice about a bicycle. The pressure of the bike shop itself can actually have an impact on us as well. I think this is slowly changing as bike shops become more family friendly and more open to new cyclists. But the sort of traditional snobbery and elitism of a bike shop is still out there. I hear about it from people all the time, especially from women who feel intimidated to go in and ask rational questions. So there are a lot of things outside of practicalities that influence our decisions. There's no magic trick to get through all this. I mean, this is all part of living in a consumer society. But I think just being aware of the influences on our decision-making process can sometimes help us make a better decision in the long run. Sometimes I'm out in the world and I see a dad with his preschooler out for a bike ride, and he's dressed in full lycra and he's clipped into the pedals and he's wobbling because they're going so slow alongside this happy preschooler who's just enjoying the moment. Or I'll see a mom walk out of the grocery store and put 2 bags of groceries on her high-performance handlebars and wobbling from the weight as she tries to get home. To me, this seems like a bit of a failure in that these people didn't stop to ask themselves what their bike is actually for. Some of this, I think, is a consequence of not fully understanding the breadth of bikes that are available on that really wide evolutionary tree. But some of it also is a failure in being honest with ourselves about how we're going to use our machines. I get it. It's easy to be in a bike shop, easily imagine yourself flying down the highway in a group ride or bombing down a single track on a beautiful mountain bike. And if that's what you're really going to do with the bike, then absolutely that's the kind of bike you should get. We should all have the right tool for the job. It just makes the pleasure that much better. But if those scenarios are more aspirational to you, then I would just urge you to be honest with yourself about how you're actually going to use that bike in the real world. Will you use it for commuting on safe separated bike lanes in your city? Will you use it to go out with the kids on a Sunday ride? Will you use it to go to Costco once a month? I have a friend who has a specific bike that he calls his pub bike because he's okay bringing it to the pub, locking it up, and depending how pub night goes, leaving it there overnight, and if it gets stolen, it won't break his heart. And if those feel like more realistic scenarios for your bike than those high performance scenarios I mentioned earlier, just keep that in mind because you may make a different decision about the bike that you go with. Almost as important as these other questions is the question of where you'll be riding your bike. And I think there's two parts to this: topography and sociology. First, think topography. Will you be riding in the city, out on gravel roads, on trails, on bike lanes? Is your route full of potholes and horribly maintained pavement, or is it nice and smooth? Is your route full of hills, and are those hills big enough that on those days when maybe you're not feeling that great, it might actually discourage you from taking your bike at all? Now that's a pretty broad interpretation of the word topography, but all of this will have a pretty big impact on the bike you choose. Then there's the sociological side of where you'll be riding, and that's more of a question of what's the culture of cycling in your city. I know that some people say that transportation cycling is just a practical choice, it's not a cultural thing, but people who say that tend to be Danish or Dutch. For the rest of us, I do think there is a culture of cycling that can vary from city to city, and that can have an impact on the choices we make. For example, some places have really great welcoming cultures of road cycling where there's lots of community meetups that are really welcoming. They'll bring people in and teach them the basics and get them going. I live in a city with an amazing mountain bike culture, and a lot of people come through bike commuting through that mountain biking community. That's also great. I've also been to cities where there seems to be cargo bikes everywhere, and so it's a real family-friendly kind of vibe in the city, and that absolutely has an impact on the way that people choose to ride on the streets of those cities. None of these things should probably be the total deciding factor in the type of bike you ride, but as humans, we all tend to want to be part of the community, so I would say that's something you probably want to think about. Okay, despite the title I just gave this section, there's no such thing as the wrong bike. All bikes are amazing, and you can use pretty much any bike in any situation, and your life will be better because a life full of bike rides is better than a life with no bike rides. But maybe, possibly, potentially, you've got a bike that maybe is not the perfect fit for what you're using it for, and you're not in a position, like who is really, to buy the specific bike for every specific function that you could use it for. Don't worry, there's still things you can do. The first thing is gear. Sometimes there's some equipment that can help you in your situation. And here's one example. This is my Priority Gemini, a gravel bike with a belt drive and a pinion gearbox, and it's amazing. I love riding this bike, but I also like riding it with clip-in pedals because I like to go fast, and that's the high-performance way of doing it, which makes it awkward when you're trying to go to the grocery store or if you have to pick up, run a few errands on your way home sometime, because then you're clip-clopping through the street in your cycling shoes, which is weird. Well, there's this new product from a company called Redshift. They call these mouse traps, and basically they clip onto your clip-in pedals to turn them into flats, so you can wear regular shoes when you take this bike out sometimes. There are also some clothing brands that are starting to bridge the gap between high performance and everyday wear. These pants I'm wearing are from a company called Ornot. They make cycling apparel, but they also make apparel that you can wear in your everyday life and not look like you're going out for a really fast road ride with your buddies. I've also been trying out a pair of cycling shorts from a company here in Calgary called Livo. They have the nice padded butt to keep you comfortable, but they're not as tight. They're just a little bit looser, a little more casual to wear than your typical cycling shorts. So clothing and gear like this can help bridge that gap. On the other end, what if you have a really practical bike and you have a craving to get out there for longer, more adventurous rides? Well, there is some gear that can help with this as well. Getting a new set of faster tires can make a huge difference. You can swap out things like handlebars to get yourself in a more athletic riding position that can help speed things up a bit. So there is some things that you can do to your bike to make it go faster and for longer. And I'd say there's some changes that we can all do as cyclists as well. I think we can all be a little bit more open to what we'll call non-conforming bikes or gear as well. And seriously, as a recreational or amateur cyclist, does it really make that much difference if you don't have the perfect gear? Cycling can be like a lot of sports, and that it can be really difficult for a newbie or even somebody who's been in it for a while to buck the conformity of the culture. But cycling is not like sports in that it is also something you can do everyday life as a transportation choice. I mean, you're not taking your soccer cleats to the grocery store. So I think we can all be a bit more open and welcoming to those who are just getting out on their bike as often as they can, because we all know cycling makes our lives better. That's why we do this. Okay, that's it. I hope that gave you a little something to think about as you approach the bike in your commuting or transportation bike life. A huge thanks to all of my sponsors and members. You help make this channel possible. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.